Really? You clicked on a video of Sausage Party that's more than an hour long? Alrighty then, dude. Sausage Party can now be considered a series, a saga, since it's had 2 whole installments. Were you aware of this? Not only is there the massively iconic original Sausage Party movie, but there was also an Amazon TV series that goes all the way further down into the depths of something. From start to finish, this is just going to be an unending fever dream. Here is our discussions over the years of the terrible, quaint, ahead of its time, controversial, a lot of adjectives. This is our coverage of the Sausage Party saga. Enjoy, if you're into that kind of thing. Ah, Sausage Party. What a fever dream of a film we all forgot about 3.5 years ago. And what a surprise from the norm compared to what we're used to. An R-rated computer-animated movie parodying Pixar all about the horrific perspectives of food rolled out in copious amounts of strange imagery and adult humor? This film has a lot to unpack about it, from concept to delivery, out of context, and its potential sequel. Now, R-rated films seem to be a growing trend in the film industry right now. Joker just blew ratings out of the water, we had Deadpool and Logan in the past, and you can bet executives are looking into this direction for their next big hit. And Sausage Party is very much one of those outstanding R-rated films, despite it being a little unique. This film released back in August 2016 and sextupled its money from $19 million to $140.4 million. And the reviews were pretty good. It's not an artistic masterpiece, but people found it charming. Stupid, yeah, but funny. And while there are plenty of qualms with the content to be made, many found it thought-provoking and a great watch, assuming they didn't accidentally haul their child into the cinemas like a complete idiot that probably a bunch of people probably actually did. Now, this video's title is probably phrased slightly differently from the rest of the videos in this series for a couple of reasons. Mainly, the context around this sequel is more conceptual at the moment, but I thought it was interesting enough to mention anyway. And last time we spoke about the Lego Batman movie, which while was intended to have a sequel, the idea of this has since likely been shot down due to ownership rights. The kind of thing that isn't really discussed in year-old articles. Doing all this film research is still new on me, and I'm very bad when it comes to who owns what when everything's shuffling about and what it means for the billion things every monopoly has these days. So hopefully I'll be more up-to-date in finding these kind of details as I go, but in this case, while a sequel has been entirely realized and built up to in the first film, currently all we really know is that Seth Rogen has the motivations to make it and bring it into a live-action setting. Maybe it's actually in production, maybe it's not, but let's look into the parts that made the original so successful and how it could be transformed for a sequel. And since it's 2020, I may be tweaking the formula in the future, starting with more emphasis on the speculative sequel talks, but we'll get there when we get there. So the story follows the idea of what if foods had feelings. Pixar's already explored what if toys had feelings, bugs had feelings, fish, cars, robots, if feelings had feelings, and soon enough if souls had feelings too. But from the perspective of food, things would probably be a whole lot more messed up, and there's a reason Ratatouille is about the rat and not the food he makes. And really, the first trailer perfectly wraps up the film's entire premise. While in the supermarket, all foods are optimistically oblivious to the horrors of their inevitable demise. So when reality hits them hard, suddenly life gets a whole lot darker. Our main protagonist is Frank the Sausage, who acts as your standard everyman hero. He has simple desires, he believes in the lies the world tells him, and once the inciting incident begins, he's the first to become a non-believer and leap into action to save everybody. Though he doesn't come off as an entirely clean-picked hero. I mean, the very first word in the film, and from him, is a swear word. And the dude is consistently swearing throughout the entire thing. And that is a trait that is prevalent in literally every single character in this whole film. The script in general is seriously pushing on all sides to make clear that this is not a movie for kids. And really, personally, it's not my cup of tea. Having so many excessive swear words and controversial buzzwords crammed in as much as possible feels childish and lazy. But for some reason, there's a kind of charm and success to it as well. This entire film is vulgar and really leaning for that R rating, and as someone who chooses not to swear at all, while I found it a tad repulsive in a vacuum, in the context of this film, it works quite well somehow. The nature of this world is raw, and the characters all reflect that in their own way. And though it's not the first time cartoons have sworn, it fits well enough here, and the vulgarity isn't mean-spirited in any way. Oddly enough, sometimes the film even seems smart and thought-provoking amidst all this chaos. So, jumping ahead for a moment to the idea of the sequel, one thing that would very much be expected to continue is this unique vulgarity from every facet of this film. I mean, that's just sequel 101 right there. If most of the same characters are gonna return, then you could assume their language will continue too. And part of the reason this film stands out so much is because it is an R-rated animated film. In fact, it became the highest grossing R-rated animated movie of all time. So following that logic, it sounds pretty likely that a sequel would be high up on the list of priorities for a new edition, and it would be pretty damn R-rated to boot. If it worked so well the first time, then surely a second has a good chance to pop up again sometime too. Anyway, back to the plotline, our pack of protagonists were all chosen by a customer aptly named Camel and surnamed Toe, but an incident caused a bit of a mess, splitting the gang spatially and mentally, as Frank wishes to follow the line of questioning about whether being chosen was actually a happy ending or not. So Frank and his hot dog bun girlfriend Brenda end up still in the shop searching for answers and a way back to their shelf, whilst the other food and sausages go to the promised lands. Our villain also pops up here being not food but an item in the douche, who's broken from the fall and vows revenge on the protagonists. You know, it's weird just saying these words when I mean it more literally than I usually do, and considering YouTube literally scours dialogue for swear words these days, I'm actually a little concerned something will get picked up here. Fun. But yes, another point that kind of drives all of these characters different is the ideology of the Promised Land, which has a lot more clear connections to general religion for the film to explore. The foods don't really know the truth, how could they? So they rely on beliefs to influence their way of being, from the literal idea of the Promised Lands to literal abstinence wherever possible, and even broader stabs like the idea that those who created the religion have seen it warped to fit other views that weren't originally intended. This driving force is actually something that covers the entire film and is kind of finalized off by the end of it, as the disparity between belief and reality is solved, and so the characters move on independently moving forwards from there. So for the sequel, surely this element of religious imagery would need to be a miss, unless some other ideological overhang is introduced to continue the story's theming further on. Perhaps instead of clinging to the promised land of being bought, the characters do much the same with the new dimension introduced at the end of the film, hoisting their voice actors as their actual gods, or switching over to choosing to be god killers now that they own their own destiny. Other options for the sequel could have the film tackle the idea of atheism and poking fun at the other perception of religion, or general ethical questions of what is right or wrong against no judgment from any existing god. Or hell, maybe this other dimension does have a god of some sort and it all just repeats again. Still, it'd be an interesting aspect to see how it is adapted over, as it's one of the more iconic aspects of the original, but surely is lost by the end of that first film. So as the film continues forwards, the other foods and sausages are brutally murdered, and only Barry the deformed sausage survives and experiences reality in all of its horrifying forms. He also learns that the consumption of bath salts allows humans to see food as they see themselves. Gotta push those boundaries with drugs too. This is a mechanic of the world that'll likely carry over into the sequel in some form. Maybe other drugs are introduced too, but that seems like overworking it all to me. Frank and Brenda discover the origins of the religion and split off on their objectives, with Brenda getting home unsatisfied and Frank discovering proof in store with a cookbook, which is just a fun and quirky way to play with the concept of this world, really. I like it. Everyone crashes back into the store for the climax and a solution to all of their problems, with them being that Barry learns that humans are not immortal since his was killed in a freak accident, so killing humans and their gods is the correct way forwards. And potentially a plot for the sequel if the food wish to continue to antagonize their voice actory gods.
We're gonna go to this other dimension, cut the strings once and for all.
Meanwhile, Frank reveals to the store effectively what's going on. At first to rejection, as one would kind of expect with those kind of beliefs, until reality attacks them and they must unite to survive. Suddenly there's a big old fight with a bunch of food puns and both our item antagonist and our human antagonist both die in an explosion. The food then also consummate their victory and newfound freedom from the gods through words and actions that I seriously don't want to announce on YouTube. January revenue already cuts down enough, so I'll skip over that. I will say though, it's a unique resolution for the whole religion question and all the more immature boundary pushing, since I don't think this will ever be replicated in cinemas again. Except for maybe the sequels, I guess, perhaps, maybe? Who knows, maybe one of the food characters will try to get it on with a real human. It's a weird thought, I know, but like, Sausage Party clearly likes playing with the absurdly explicit, and that would be an interesting next step. But really, that is what sequels are all about, expanding further the concept of the first film. So reaching further with that climactic release, or antagonizing the humans, or playing with the influences of drugs just seems like the next logical step. Perhaps with certain characters taking on all different opinions and objectives in the sequel. Some may hate their humans and some may try to worship others. There's also an assortment of food puns and connections made throughout the film that can only really continue more. The villain had a running gag of accidentally calling out food from his phrasing, which could be readapted to keep it fresh in another form. Or even just the concept of food can be explored more. This film only focused on supermarket food, but what about food that's put on display like they are in certain places? Or how were they born? I mean, aren't sausages originally pigs? So when does the conversion from one animal to like 20 sausages become real? Or what about the other dimensions food? Are they inanimate and acceptable to eat? Or what about other items that have come to life? A book doesn't speak, but toilet paper does. What about phones or tools, key rings, toys? Honestly, there's a lot of Toy Story connections going on here, you know? What happens in the bin or the recycling? Really, there's a good handful of avenues left to explore in the horrifying world of Sausage Party that is just aching to be covered in a sequel. There's simply a lot of potential for it. And though I've sung its praises for the concept and foundation already put down, and though it is the most successful of its type, there are some major factors bringing down the idea of the sequel being realized. With the major one being, a seemingly industry standard at this point, abusing your animators. Woo! So after the film's release, it emerged that animators were forced to work under poor conditions and by co-director Greg Tierman's demands, to work overtime unpaid. All of the animators were told outright that if they did not do so, they would be blacklisted, and a total of 36 out of 83 animators were in fact blacklisted and went uncredited after all was done. They were later on entitled to receive overtime pay, but even still, this is yet another major case of animators getting shafted in the film industry, and honestly, it's just unacceptable. They were granted their funds in March 2019. 3 years after the film was out. This could have impacted the brand of Sausage Party, or may put the concept of a sequel at a disadvantage against other studios wishing not to take on the task. I mean, I know I wouldn't want to animate for this schlep, but who knows? I'd like another film, but I'll always side with animators in this scenario. But of course, the sequel's foundations have already been set, and oddly enough, may have less of an emphasis on the animated startup that the first film had. After the climax of the film, the ending was changed into one that led into the sequel, with Super Genius character Gum creating a device into a new dimension after discovering that their reality is still not reality, since they are all animations. This new dimension opens up to the real world, where they can come face to face with their voice actor counterparts, with the suggestion being that the sequel has a Who Framed Roger Rabbit approach to its format, having a merge of live action with animation. Something I would particularly like to see considering the leaps and bounds of technology we've had since the last mashup. Plus, the 3 main examples of this format all use 2D animation as their animating technique, so seeing it reproduced with computer-generated 3D animation would be particularly interesting to see, as the only examples of that really is the copious amounts of general CG we see, which sometimes is pretty flawless, or at least blemishes are very well hidden these days. It's a concept that certainly piques my interest. And though all we have as a practical idea for this film is the concept and motivations of Seth Rogen wanting another, there's still a multitude of ideas to be explored that we can speculate and extrapolate over. The R-rated boundary pushing will continue, religious dualities may need to be reinvented or scrapped altogether, new characters may be approached in several ways, from the antagonizing of the new gods or the revelations of more characters of the food world. Will there be another douche-like villain to coincide with another? And what more explicit content can be pushed against? And can it expand further whilst avoiding any mean-spirited behavior? Or will it never be produced at all among the controversies of immoral management? Unfortunately, this time around, I don't really have the answer for all of that. Sausage Party is an enigma that certainly stands out from the crowd, and though it's hard to stomach for some, and morally it's a tad more on the grey side, I would be interested in a sequel one way or another. And for all we know, Sausage Party could be coming back in a whole new live-action coat. I just hope it's not that type of coating. Oh god, who asked for this? Why is this on my screen? Ah god, and it just keeps going. This is Sausage Party Futopia. It is the Sausage Party TV series that Amazon is making for some reason. A trailer came out a few weeks back, as well as a couple poster images, and there wasn't really that much buzz as far as I could tell around this new series. And now, just as quickly as it appeared in announcement form, here it is in full form. And like, why? Who asked for this? Is this an in-demand project? The original 2018 Sausage Party movie, I think as well, didn't really have the kind of buzz that it was maybe going for. Obviously being an adult version of a parody of the Toy Story Pixar formula. It got headlines in the fact that the initial trailer was good for chewing on baby carrots, and then the actual reception of the movie was pretty meh. It's very toilet humor happy, has a weird dynamic where it's kind of aimed for adults with its clearly adult humor, but also it's the kind of adult humor that's very prepubescent, you know, it's very 15-year-old coded. So perhaps with 6 years of thinking and retrospective, maybe a little bit of self-reflection going on there, maybe they can actually expand what is apparently going to be a franchise now into something that's genuinely a little bit more than 15-year-old humor. Well, I certainly sat down this morning for the full 4 hours. I have now seen everything related to Amazon's Sausage Party. I've seen all of Season 1, and yes, there is probably going to be a Season 2, and I gotta tell you, it is just a fever dream of its own. This, as a project, you know, I don't think I hate it per se, considering I very recently have been dealing with the likes of the Megamind Peacock series. This is a blessing in comparison. It is god-tier animation when you actually compare the two projects. But honestly, if I hadn't had Megamind as a palate cleanser, a very intense palate cleanser that makes me have the lowest of standards, this series ain't nothing special. The best way to explain it really, the best way I can really come to understand it is 100% just Sausage Party content, you know? It is a direct sequel from the initial movie. In case you're not aware what happened in the initial movie, food rose up against the humans in the supermarket, they win. There you go, that's the whole plotline essentially. There's a whole element of bath salts as a drug allows humans to see the food. The food, if they are inserted into a human's butthole, will be able to control the human. You know, very intelligent stuff here. Now, in the very first episode of the series, they all come rushing out of the supermarket, and then in comedically fast timing, all of humanity is fully dominated, and so food becomes the dominant species of the planet. Alright, we don't see any other human wars going on outside of the supermarket. I don't know if every other food in the world knows about this uprising, but by defeating the humans in the car park outside of the supermarket, now the foods are in control. Sure, whatever. With a series like this, you know, with this kind of vibe of the world, you can just sort of roll with it sometimes. I'm still gonna be boring and cynical, but sure, alright. So the idea is, who runs the world? Food. Food! From there, it's like, again, I think the best way I can really explain it is it's kind of like simultaneously faintly edgy adult material mixed with baby's first politics. Now, I'm not going to exactly say that the initial movie had the deepest of characters. The full depth that these characters could really attain is the fact that one of the Bredley characters has a single pube actually animated on themselves. But at the same time, the characters in this series are even more shallow than that. And really, they just fall into archetypes of cliches, but not in a way that's really making commentary or even parodying anything. It's just simple stuff going on exactly as you would expect. Literally, it is like baby's first story. Just slightly more adult, but not really. So beyond the fact that the food now own the world and are getting to live their own utopia, naturally, we first have a giant orgy scene, but I do enjoy the fact that the two main characters just talk to each other normally while walking through the orgy scenario. Is the closest thing to the comedy I'll find interesting in this series. And then just as everyone's living their paradisical lifestyle of being swingers the entire time, removing all stigmatisms for who sucks who, apparently, then we are introduced to, oh my god, rain! So rain comes flooding down from the sky, absolutely demolishing all sorts of food. And you know what? That's vaguely interesting, you know? How do foods deal with more natural disasters? Now that the world is mostly gone of humans, there could still be things to worry about, sure. This rain then also turns into a flood, all sorts of characters die, whether you're attached to them or not. Some of them start standing out, like an orange who is entirely based around the fact that he's got a butthole-shaped pulp thing on the backside of him. as well as a tiny little rice girl that's constantly getting stepped on and abandoned by everybody. The old man Gum, if you remember him, he dies in that flood protecting everybody else, and then instead of being like, whoa, that was weird, well, we're gonna build this community up together and continue the utopian life, the general public foods, I should say, then just start to be characters in a child series. And what I mean by that is they literally just start mobbing to go back into the supermarket to say, hey, we don't know what that water was about, so we're gonna hide in fear and also be angry about it, and angry at you, the leader, for not knowing what it is either. And it's like, that's not natural. That's not, like, I mean, it's talking food, it's not gonna be natural, but still, like, it's really stupid, especially when you look at other things like the fact that the supermarket has one giant glass ceiling, so theoretically, in their past, they should have been able to see rain before. They would have heard it hitting the top of the ceiling and looked up and see rain from the sky the whole time, but instead, no, it becomes the centerpiece for this conflict the whole time. And so it's Frankfurter's main goal now to find out what that rain was, and it's like, I don't know, man. It's very stupid in that way. And that's not even getting into whatever the hell the messaging of this series is meant to be. If it's saying that the general public are so stupid and angry that they'll go back to the discomforting safety of what they're used to as opposed to experiencing something new. I don't know if I'm meant to read into it that far, but it'll only get worse as we continue. And then, so yeah, the rest of it is basically the foods trying to build their own utopia. Yeah? You get it? Foodtopia? Great. Zootopia? We're on board now. But then it is just a matter of every predictable conflict you can think of essentially pops up. One of the weirder ones is the use of Barry, the little sausage guy from before, yeah? He is now, like, bloodthirsty. He only has a purpose when he's at war, so he doesn't enjoy the utopia unless he's basically killing humans. So he goes out and finds another human that's been kidnapping some of the food, apparently. He does end up killing a couple at the campsite, and then they kidnap one of the other ones, using him to try and find information about what's going on. Using that human, they then instantly deal with this initial conflict of working out what the rain is, because he explains it, and also they get the food to come outside of the supermarket now that it's falling apart and the sky is blue, so they know it's safe, you know? And, like, that's fine. The human thing is only going to go into weirder directions. We'll get there in a bit. There's also Sammy the Bagel, who's grieving his friend and so decides to get into the entertainment business. All right, he does stand-up comedy all the time. Sure, whatever. It's also then at this point that they do more like basic politics things where now that the people are out and about and it's just free reign for everybody, they start being very divisive, claiming land for just themselves immediately and cutting people off. You know, just being general dicks to each other. Again, is that commentary for the public as a whole? I don't know, because it's by the ending, it's not got a very good messaging about it, but we'll get there when we get there. Still, you get the idea. Everyone starts claiming their own land and splitting up and saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. By episode 3, you start to see what the real premise of this show is. It's not to tell a convincing storyline, as much as I'm going to keep telling you all the ins and outs about it. It's not to tell any great message or to really be that entertaining. It's food puns. It is almost entirely just food puns. And this is why I call it content. Because it's basically, hey, if you're given a sack of money to make more sausage party, what do? Well, you probably shove another sausage off of some human's butthole. We'll get there later. And you'll probably make all of the food-related jokes you can. And in this one, they're setting up for a Burning Man festival. There are parallels to, you know, human American Western society here. Again, we'll get to the messaging in a bit. And in doing so, they need auditions to find out who's going to be performing. Very Sing, you know, it's just auditions of food puns and jokes around it. And it's just a lot of that for like at least the first 5 minutes. There's a character that sings Do Re Mi, but does it with dough bread lasagna. Their name is Adil, because they are a dill pickle. You've got Bruno Mars, Peter Ora, and Katy Perrier. And like, that's 80% of the comedy. The other 20% is butthole stuff. And like, I guess that's fine, but I would also argue it's just so basic and boring, you know? It's like, it's easy, is what it is. This show is just following the easy route. It's not necessarily following cliches, but it's just following the simple, easy pathway. And it's not doing it in a way that's commentary. You know, like how on Amazon Prime at the same time you have The Boys, which is very much a commentary parody of the current American political circumstances. This is not that. It's just doing those same circumstances. It's not making a point about it. It's not commentating on it. It's just mirroring it. whilst not even going further into the fact that isn't it weird that the food have invented human society exactly like human society was before it. It's not even that. It's just following the motions. Anyway, the next big conflict is no longer the rain, but the fact that there is a crow, one singular crow, and that's it. So they have to use the human to find the information to save themselves from the crow, so they make a scarecrow out of another human corpse. Thankfully, nothing really molds in this universe, so everything just continues lingering forever. Even the finger. The human loses a finger at the start of the episode, and he has all 5 of them by the end again. You got the other element of Frank and Brenda thinking that they actually need to save the human that's alive because they need him for more information and more problem solving, so that becomes a whole heist sequence. Olivia Rodriguez is another pun that's just shoved in there randomly. They sing macaroni instead of macarena. Oh, and also they're establishing currency now, with human teeth being the new status quo. All of the song, and yeah, it's basically like a musical episode. All of the songs are some sort of food-related pun. Apart from, we're gonna start a fire, instead of, we didn't start the fire, when they start the fire. Cinema. By episode 4, we have bettings and monopolies, as the orange butthole guy has 107 teeth and so can buy practically whatever he wants. You know, it's capitalism en masse, I guess. They're the villain, so I guess there's something to say about that, but it doesn't really go, you know. Sammy, also now wanting to be the front and center of entertainment attention, goes and starts a coup in order to gain a broadcasting station. Barry, the little sausage guy, sets up a task force in order to start cracking down on crime, namely the fact that people are starting to steal teeth now, because there is, of course, a financing gap. You've got the super rich orange that can buy whatever he wants, and then you've now developed a food slums, which again, you know, I guess is edgy. They don't really do anything different with it. It's just, hey, there are poor people, they are forced to steal teeth, you send them to court, and then you realize they were kind of justified because they just needed to live. Oops, oh well, haha. Oh, but one more haha to put in here. One of the popsicles, his wood's shaped like testicles, ha ha ha. Honestly, the only real visual joke I think I do enjoy from this show so far is the fact that there's an avocado who has no seed in his belly, so he just constantly looks like he's gasping. So they just cut to him whenever there's a gasp, and he doesn't need to gasp, he just looks like he's gasping. It's great. I'm an old man, is what I'm telling you. Or I'm older than 15, is what I'm trying to say. Because this series is just continuing the trend of being low-hanging fruit and baby's first story. They then start going into commentary about maybe they should spread the wealth evenly between each other. That wouldn't be controversial, and that's as close as they get to commentary about capitalism, communism stuff. Like, they could have really delved down an interesting route and parodied it, but it's not. It's just doing it. Anyway, the orange starts stepping up as a politician who's more popular than Frank because of his capitalistic views. The human ends up eating a human foot in order to stay anti-vegan, to not eat the food because he's, you know, not supposed to anymore. It's at this point I discovered that the director is Conrad Vernon, the same guy between The Addams Family, and suddenly things start to make a whole lot more sense. And then we have a surprisingly really long sequence of the human eating the foot with sad ending music going on the whole time as the credits show on screen. Why? I don't know. Is that meant to be the symbolic thing? We're meant to be most empathetic for the human in this food-based story because he becomes a cannibal? I don't know. There's also some other interesting people attached to this show, such as Sung-Won Cho as well, who's involved, which is very cool to see. Hello there, thank you for making it halfway through this video. This is the quick plug to tell you to subscribe if you're interested in new animated reviews. There's a couple more things coming out in the next few months, so if you're interested in seeing us talk about those, come join along as we'll inevitably get around to them, including Despicable Me 4 that comes out tomorrow in the UK, which is very late compared to the US, but we're working on it. Alright, see you in a bit. Back to the rest of the video. By episode 5, we really start lingering on a documentarian parody in the form of Veneer Hot Dog. A parody of, you know, the real life guy. Showcasing the anguishes of the poor as an egg family is dealing with, you know, having to juggle multiple jobs, and then at the end the whole egg family dies anyway. Maybe they're going for the heights of the baby carrot thing again? Yeah, but I don't think it works as well. Anyway, now things are slippery sloping even more. Orange Julius has bought the task force and so is shutting down Frank's rally. He also corrupts the courts by making the judge also vote in his favor. And then it develops even more with Frank realizing you gotta fight evil with evil. You need to gain money in order to have all of the power. So he goes and does a Fast and Furious, and that's literally what they call it, in order to do a heist movie, just like Fast and Furious 5, in order to steal a bunch of Orange Julius's money in order to do future campaign things. You know, it ends up with a police pile-up. Barry, who's trying to be kind of like the police force, is chucked into the fountain, almost discovering
Frank's secret identity wearing a potato sack. And then Brenda breaks up with Frank for taking the more evil route to achieve their goals. I might say this is probably the highlight of the series, just because it's got, interesting chasing action scenes and it goes on for a while. There's, visual stuff there. There's a couple, good edgy jokes I enjoyed, like Brenda saying, "You did Potato Head?" As if to infer that is blackface in the food universe. They don't really explain a lot of the rules in this series, and that's kind of the point. The human asks about how a bunch of rules work, and they don't explain it any further than that, and they say, "Shut up, it makes sense anyway." So, yeah, that's probably the highlight. It just continues to get weird here. The documentarian continues to stalk Brenda the entire time through this series in a way that's sort of, important for the story, but also genuinely creepy and a surprise that it's still used for laughs in this modern age, but sure, whatever. But maybe that's exactly the point, considering all of this is edgy humor. Where do you draw the line after all? Is it there, really? And actually, this episode 6 is the one that legitimately has a warning from Amazon. So it's good stuff here. Barry realizes that Frank was the potato man from before. The human continues to give advice to Frank as a politician. There's more food puns like "I've got butter, jam, and mayo," spreading the word. All the while Brenda is campaigning with the poor people in the slums. And then, oh boy, it makes sense. If you were trying to expand the edgier, overly crude nature of Sausage Party the movie, what would you do in Sausage Party the series, where you've got one human left? You've already shown humans being killed all the time. What else dodgy thing can you do that would warrant a warning from Amazon? Why, you make the human fall in love with Frank the Sausage, and yes, they do indeed have a sex scene. It is pretty graphic, kind of. You surprisingly don't see that many body parts. You do in one shot, and yes, you do see the shot afterwards. All the while, at the same time, you then have Barry and Brenda walking in on the two of them as well. It is 5 minutes I will not be able to remove from my brain. And so the human and Frank go on the run, justifying it, as a lot of presidents have had sex scandals. Frank then has to come back to do a political speech. Brenda splits off from his team and creates a third politician. This then splits the vote so that the guy on the right gets it, Mr. Orange Julius over there. And then I guess that's their commentary on splitting the vote, I guess. Frank's sex scandal immediately gets out, and then Julius Orange wins the election. It's not really commentary this whole time, it's just kind of shock humor. And I think, honestly, it makes sense. It's weird. I don't need to see a repeat of it. I apologize if any of the shots have shown up in the background while I'm talking in this section, but that's where the series goes. That's the big plot twist. Yes, they animated semen in this show. Animated cinema. Still is such a shame that this is the best that Western adult animation can do, With mature animation, I really would have liked if it was less immature, but, at the same time, it had been 6 years since the last time, so is that refreshing? I don't know. Anyway, episode 7, we start getting to the ending sequence. Orange Julius is now dressed as Julius Caesar. There's a slow piano opening as he's essentially the king of this place. There's now a parade. With his influence, he's trying to de-emphasize the slums in any broadcasting. They announce the fact that they're not doing any fact-checking. Someone makes a reference to the Holocaust, calling it the Cholocaust. We'll leave that one packaged away there. I don't think it was... I think it was just sort of chucked in there as a, hey, wow, we're edgy. Fine. Brenda decides to forgive Frank. Frank then ends up breaking up with his human, who's still out back in the campsite. Barry and Sammy, that bagel guy, have an argument. But then the real shtick of the things is Brenda goes out to talk to Orange Julius and finds him in his home after heisting into the place, all tied up, as we come to learn that it hasn't been Orange Julius in control this whole time. It has in fact been the tiny little Jerry Rice girl at the very beginning of the series. As it turns out, in her origin story, again, this is like 90% of the reason why this show exists, probably. There's room for more food puns. After we've had the recurring gag that the orange has a very noticeable butthole, and it does sometimes, pucker up for the sake of animation, we come to learn that in the precipice of the supermarket falling apart, she, as the tiny little thing that was always looked over and abandoned by everybody, dived into what she describes as his badonkadonk, and has been controlling him the entire time instead. Kind of standard. What a surprise. The smallest, most insignificant character was in fact the villain the whole time. She mentioned the fact that she leveled up in doing so, and I think that's the closest thing to political commentary on UK politics, which I'm sure is just a coincidence, but the politicians here loved to have said we're leveling up now, so something I can take for vaguely more smart than it actually is. And then it becomes a fist fight between Brenda and the Orange. And I'll admit, I quite like this fight scene. I mean, it still has, you know, sausage party elements to it, like the fact that Brenda gets her arm stuck in the Orange's butthole, and then he clenches and throws her away with a fart sound effect. Also, there's an element of the real Orange trying to talk to Brenda sometimes, or pretending that it's actually Julius when the rice is controlling him or isn't. And then Frank goes and follows up, finding that the sink has been set off with the water, pulling Brenda out and realizing that she has lost her bottom half. Dies in this series as well. She struggles to get out her last dying words, just like the gum did in like the very first episode, and Brenda dies right there. And Frank is imprisoned for the murder. Final episode now. It's a funeral, starting off with more musical, punly food things going on. Frank's cell is clearly just shopping baskets that he can just walk through when you see the size of them. Lavash starts talking to Sammy, who is the breadly guy that he's been grieving this whole time. I don't remember him dying in the movie, but apparently he dies at the start of the series or something. A new TV guy shows up, who's a donut. His name is Duncan Donut. And the villain decides that they're going to publicly execute Frank in front of everybody. With Frank and Sammy planning to breaking up with the help of Wiener Hot Dog, who's obviously been stalking Brenda this whole time and has footage of her being murdered by the rice, actually, very specifically, not the Orange. We saw the part where the rice comes out and sends the tap off. Also, Barry realizes that they need to have a perfect frisbee throw into the vents to access the broadcasting station, and this whole time the human has shown that they can throw plates very well like a frisbee, so it's like an Avengers-style team-up in the ending. Of course it is. Although I do like at one point, Frank is given like the execution walk, and instead of obviously tomatoes being thrown at him, there's just a couple tomatoes who keep jumping at him. And that's it. That's stupid, but fun. There's also a pile of cans as like the dropping system for the execution. There's vaguely, sometimes, good ideas and executions for the food idea, but it's, you know, far and few between. Sammy then broadcasts the real footage with his phone as much as he struggles the whole time. Barry ends up killing multiple foods in protecting him for a while. Everyone learns of the rice coup and deception that everyone's been going through. There's then another fight sequence where Julius is protected by dog food. They are literally working like dogs. Barry chases Julius, finally squirts the rice out, and then they choose to spare the rice as well. With the last minute, you know, wow, we're gonna be the good guys by being the good guys. So it's just the classic unsatisfying ending. Frank gives a final pep talk. Rice says, I only saw the worst in food and they brought out the worst in me. And then that would be the ending, but it's not. The crow takes the rice because in that fight, the scarecrow human corpse fell down. Frank then takes on the leader position in the transition. He says, throw down your teeth and remove currency just like Brenda was advocating for. And while you think that could be a weird, unsatisfying ending to the series, it's not. Because then the public go out to reject him as well. Saying, why are we listening to him? Who put him in charge now? We don't have a leader. They fight over their land once again, saying, this is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Now that the rice guy that owns everything has died, there's like a power vacuum. Frank then leaves, abandoning everyone because the public have gone mad. He comes back with the human and says, I'm the leader now by force. You cannot be trusted to make your own decisions. I'm in charge now. And legitimately, that's the ending. What? Why? How? Also, there is a human drone that's been watching that final moment. So, like, it's an open ending to season 2. But, like, what is this? Where are you going here? Is the message that the public are stupid and they should have a certain type of leader? I get that the protagonists were going for a let's not have over-the-top late-stage capitalism as our way to run the society, and remove currency, I guess, is an idea. But then it goes into, hey, we don't even get the happy ending because people will always be greedy and going after their land? Okay, interesting. Are you gonna do anything more with that? Or are you just gonna say, oh, the public are stupid, what a shame, take them down by 4? It's weird, man. This series isn't trying to say anything, but what it does say is just convoluted and weird and simplistic and kind of boring, you know? This has been sausage party content through and through. Do you want sausages going up a buttholes? You've got sausages going up a butthole. Have you got gratuitous orgy scenes and multiple sex scenes with characters? Of course you do. Do you have food puns by the dozen with a million different tiny puns and visual gags? Yeah. Do you have a good series that's a very decent sequel to the original movie's premise? Not really. There's a lot of things that could be improved, but to be honest, the initial movie was also flawed in a lot of ways. It's miles above the Megamind Peacock DreamWorks series. I mean, that one is just an actual 1 out of 10. This isn't terrible. It's also not great. It's barely good. It's just passable. It's just more stuff to consume, ironically, with all of these foods going on. It's like 6 out of 10, you know what I mean? It's not so neutral that it's nothing. It can supply something to somebody if you're the type, but it's simultaneously edgy 18+ content whilst being a political story that's built for someone that's never heard of politics before. It's as if it was literally written for those that don't have any reading comprehension. Because it's not doing commentary about American politics, it's just doing American politics. Referencing some of the kookier things of the American system, and then that's it. It's just references. For the last 4 hours, I've been watching this unfold and going into territory I certainly didn't think it would dare to, and now on the end of it, I'm dissatisfied by the ending, and not very motivated for the fact that there probably will be a season 2 as well. Through and through, just like the initial movie, Sausage Party Futopia, the Amazon Prime series, is definitely, best way to put it, a fever dream. I'm glad it's behind me. It was certainly something to feast your eyes on, but I'm ready to put it there. For now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this video. Do let me know your thoughts on the Sausage Party Amazon Prime series. I'd love to hear if there's actually a deeper messaging that I just missed with my lack of reading comprehension. Who knows? I don't think the show is that deep, I'll be honest. And that is where we're going to be ending things off for now. Will the Amazon TV series get a second season? Apparently yes. Okay, great. I honestly didn't think the series was going to go any further, but there is no details about when exactly it will come out just yet, so if it's soon, I won't make this video. And if it's ages away and we still don't know, hey, here's something to catch you up in the meantime. The only quote I can find about a second season of Futopia is a quote saying, if you loved season 1, you're in luck. If you did not like season 1, go f*** yourself. You are not going to like this season either. Well, alright then, that's very on brand. For now though, I'll end it off there. My name's been Daz, thank you very much for reaching to the end of this video, and I shall see you all in a little bit.